This is Cast of Wonders, the fiction podcast for young adults featuring stories of the fantastic. Episode 143 for October 26, 2014. We're almost there, everyone. The wind is howling and it's bitter cold, but the end of our journey is just around the corner as we bring you the conclusion of our Halloween special, The End of the World. For horror fans, the initials HPL bring an instant chill to the spine. The man's work hardly needs introduction. His Cthulhu mythos and its denizens have appeared in and influenced the entire artistic spectrum, from film and television to poetry, dramatic productions, plush toys, and even an excellent series of tiki mugs. An argument could be made that Lovecraft is to the macabre and strange what Shelley is to epistolary horror and Shakespeare is to modern romantic comedy. The man himself, well, that's more complicated. It would be easy to dismiss Lovecraft's neuroses and prejudices as products of his time, but that's an argument that, if you'll pardon the pun, doesn't hold water. It's difficult to find something new to say about a man whose short life has been subject to as much study as his work, so instead, I'll direct you to my favorite source for all things HPL, the Hp Lovecraft Historical Society. And while you're there, check out their excellent radio dramas. Just lock the door first. Trust me. They're at CthulhuLives.org, which we'll link for you in the show notes. This story, Dagon, was one of Lovecraft's first and was published in 1919. And who more fitting for the narration of a classic tale of apocalyptic horror than Pseudopod's own Keeper of the Dark Tower, Alistair Stewart. For those of you who don't know him, he's a freelance culture journalist, comic book aficionado, amateur and comedian food blogger, and author in his own right. And he makes the best evening pick-me-up cup of tea this side of Brillier. He's most frequently found on Twitter or on his website, alistairstewart.com. Stay away from the window. The time has come.
Dagon by Hp Lovecraft. I am writing this under an appreciable mental strain, since by tonight I shall be no more. Penniless, and at the end of my supply of the drug which alone makes life endurable, I can bear the torture no longer, and shall cast myself from this garret window into the squalid street below. Do not think, from my slavery to morphine, that I am a weakling or a degenerate. When you have read these hastily scrawled pages, you may guess, though never fully realize, why it is that I must have forgetfulness or death. It was in one of the most open and least frequented parts of the broad Pacific that the packet of which I was supercargo fell a victim to the German sea raider. The Great War was then at its very beginning, and the ocean forces of the Hun had not completely sunk to their later degradation, so that our vessel was made a legitimate prize, whilst we of her crew were treated with all the fairness and consideration due us as naval prisoners. So liberal, indeed, was the discipline of our captors that 5 days after we were taken, I managed to escape, alone in a small boat, with water and provisions for a good length of time. When I finally found myself adrift and free, I had but little idea of my surroundings. Never a competent navigator, I could only guess vaguely by the sun and stars that I was somewhat south of the equator. Of the longitude I knew nothing. No island, no coastline was in sight. The weather kept fair, and for uncounted days I drifted aimlessly beneath the scorching sun, waiting either for some passing ship or to be cast on the shores of some habitable land. But neither ship nor land appeared, and I began to despair in my solitude upon the heaving vastnesses of unbroken blue. The change happened whilst I slept. Its details I shall never know, for my slumber, though troubled and dream-infested, was continuous. When at last I awaked, it was to discover myself half sucked into a slimy expanse of hellish black mire, which extended about me in monotonous undulations as far as I could see, and in which my boat lay grounded some distance away. Though one might well imagine that my first sensation would be of wonder at so prodigious and unexpected a transformation of scenery, I was in reality more horrified than astonished, for there was in the air and in the rotting soil a sinister quality which chilled me to the very core. The region was putrid, with the carcasses of decaying fish and of other less describable things, which I saw protruding from the nasty mud of the unending plain. Perhaps I should not hope to convey in mere words the unutterable hideousness that can dwell in absolute silence and barren immensity. There was nothing within hearing, nothing in sight, save a vast reach of black slime, yet the very completeness of the stillness and the homogeneity of the landscape oppressed me with a nauseating fear. The sun was blazing down from a sky which seemed to me almost black in its cloudless cruelty, as though reflecting the inky marsh beneath my feet. As I crawled into the stranded boat, I realized that only one theory could explain my position. Through some unprecedented volcanic upheaval, a portion of the ocean floor must have been thrown to the surface, exposing regions which for innumerable millions of years had lain hidden under unfathomable watery depth. So great was the extent of this new land which had arisen beneath me that I could not detect the faintest noise of the surging ocean, strain my ears as I might. Nor were there any seafowl to prey upon the dead things. For several hours I sat thinking or brooding in the boat, which lay upon its side and afforded a slight shade as the sun moved across the heavens. As the day progressed, the ground lost some of its stickiness and seemed likely to dry sufficiently for travelling purposes in a short time. That night I slept but little, and the next day I made for myself a pack containing food and water, preparatory to an overland journey in search of the vanished sea and possible escape. On the third morning I found the soil dry enough to walk upon with ease. The odour of the fish was maddening, but I was too much concerned with graver things to mind so slight an evil, and set out boldly for an unknown goal. All day I forged steadily westward, guided by a faraway hummock that rose higher than any other elevation on the rolling desert. That night I encamped, and on the following day still travelled toward the hummock, though the object seemed scarcely nearer than when I had first espied it. By the fourth evening I attained the base of the mound, which turned out to be much higher than it had appeared from a distance, an intervening valley setting it out in sharper relief from the general surface. Too weary to attend, I slept in the shadow of the hill. I know not why my dreams were so wild that night. But ere the waning and fantastically gibbous moon had risen far above the eastern plain, I was awake in a cold perspiration, determined to sleep no more. Such visions as I had experienced were too much for me to endure ever again, and in the glow of the moon I saw how unwise I had been to travel by day. Without the glare of the parching sun, my journey would have cost me less energy. Indeed, I now felt quite able to perform the ascent which had deterred me at sunset. Picking up my pack, I started for the crest of the eminence. I have said that the unbroken monotony of the rolling plain was a source of vague horror to me, but I think my horror was greater when I gained the summit of the mound and looked down the other side into an immeasurable pit or canyon, whose black recesses the moon had not yet soared high enough to illumine. I felt myself on the edge of the world, peering over the rim into a fathomless chaos of eternal night. Through my terror ran curious reminiscences of Paradise Lost and of Satan's hideous climb through the unfashioned realms of darkness. As the moon climbed higher in the sky, I began to see that the slopes of the valley were not quite so perpendicular as I had imagined. Ledges and outcroppings of rock afforded fairly easy footholds for a descent, whilst after a drop of a few hundred feet the declivity became very gradual. Urged on by an impulse which I cannot definitely analyze. I scrambled with difficulty down the rocks and stood on the gentler slope beneath, gazing into the Stygian depths where no light had yet penetrated. All at once, my attention was captured by a vast and singular object on the opposite slope, which rose steeply about 100 yards ahead of me, an object that gleamed whitely in the newly bestowed rays of the ascending moon. That it was merely a gigantic piece of stone, I soon assured myself, but I was conscious of a distinct impression that its contour and position were not altogether the work of nature. A closer scrutiny filled me with sensations I cannot express. For despite its enormous magnitude and its position in an abyss which had yawned at the bottom of the sea since the world was young, I perceived beyond a doubt that the strange object was a well-shaped monolith whose massive bulk had known workmanship and perhaps the worship of living and thinking creatures. Dazed and frightened, yet not without a certain thrill of the scientist's or archaeologist's delight, I examined my surroundings more closely. The moon, now near the zenith, shone weirdly and vividly above the towering steeps that hemmed in the chasm, and revealed the fact that a far-flung body of water flowed at the bottom, winding out of sight in both directions, and almost lapping my feet as I stood on the slope. Across the chasm, the wavelets washed the base of the Cyclopean monolith, on whose surface I could now trace both inscriptions and crude sculptures. The writing was in a system of hieroglyphics unknown to me, and unlike anything I had ever seen in books, consisting for the most part of conventionalized aquatic symbols such as fish, eels, octopi, crustaceans, mollusks, whales. Several characters obviously represented marine things which are unknown to the modern world, but whose decomposing forms I had observed on the ocean-risen plain. It was the pictorial carving that did most to hold me spellbound. Plainly visible across the intervening water on account of their enormous size were an array of bas-reliefs whose subjects would have excited the envy of a Doré. I think that these things were supposed to depict men, at least a certain sort of men, though the creatures were shown disporting like fishes in the waters of some marine grotto, or paying homage at some monolithic shrine, which appeared to be under the waves as well. Of their faces and forms I dare not speak in detail, for the mere remembrance makes me grow faint. Grotesque beyond the imagination of a Poe or a Bulwer, they were damnably human in general outline, despite webbed hands and feet, shockingly wide and flabby lips, glassy bulging eyes, and other features less pleasant to recall. Curiously enough, they seem to have been chiseled badly out of proportion with their scenic background, for one of the creatures was shown in the act of killing a whale, represented as but little larger than himself. I remarked, as I say, their grotesqueness and strange size, but in a moment decided that they were merely the imaginary gods of some primitive fishing or seafaring tribe, some tribe whose last descendant had perished eras before the first ancestor of the Piltdown or Neanderthal man was born. Awestruck at this unexpected glimpse into a past beyond the conception of the most daring anthropologist, I stood musing, whilst the moon cast queer reflections on the silent channel before me. Then suddenly I saw it. With only a slight churning to mark its rise to the surface, the thing slid into view above the dark waters. Vast, Polyphemus-like and loathsome, it darted like a stupendous monster of nightmares to the monolith, about which it flung its gigantic scaly arms, the while it bowed its hideous head and gave vent to certain measured sounds. I think I went mad then. Of my frantic ascent of the slope and cliff, and of my delirious journey back to the stranded boat, I remember very little. I believe I sang a great deal and laughed, oddly, when I was unable to sing. I have indistinct recollections of a great storm some time after I reached the boat. At any rate, I know that I heard peals of thunder and other tones that nature utters only in her wildest moods. When I came out of the shadows, I was in a San Francisco hospital, brought thither by the captain of the American ship that had picked up my boat in mid-ocean. In my delirium I had said much, but found that my words had been given scant attention. Of any land upheaval in the Pacific, my rescuers knew nothing, nor did I deem it necessary to insist upon a thing which I knew they could not believe. Once I sought out a celebrated ethnologist and amused him with peculiar questions regarding the ancient Philistine legend of Dagon, the fish god. But soon perceiving that he was hopelessly conventional, I did not press my inquiries. It is at night, especially when the moon is gibbous and waning, that I see the thing. I tried morphine, but the drug has given only transient surcease and has drawn me into its clutches as a hopeless slave. So now I am to end it all, having written a full account for the information or the contemptuous amusement of my fellow men. Often I ask myself if it could not all have been a pure phantasm, a mere freak of fever as I lay sun-stricken and raving in the open boat after my escape from the German man-of-war. This I ask myself, but ever does there come before me a hideously vivid vision in reply. I cannot think of the deep sea without shuddering at the nameless things that may, at this very moment, be crawling and floundering on its slimy bed, worshipping their ancient stone idols and carving their detestable likenesses on submarine obelisks of water-soaked granite. I dream of a day when they may rise above the billows to drag down in their reeking talons the remnants of puny war-exhausted mankind, of a day when the land shall sink and the dark ocean floor shall ascend amidst universal pandemonium. The end is near. I hear a noise at the door as of some immense slippery body lumbering against it, and it shall not find me. God, that hand! The window! The window!
Hello, boys and ghouls. Welcome once again to a Halloween Scream Fest.
Yes, it's time to get scared. Come inside. The party's just beginning. We're ready for dinner. Are you ready to be the main course? Come on in. The blood is fine.
Hi there. Hey, Alan. It's been a while, hasn't it? Oh, you must be Marguerite. It's nice to finally meet you. I'm the Creeper. And I figured that I would come here with some of my buddies, my new friends, my pals, my chums, and we'd crash the party. Wait, there's no party? Phooey, we will have one. Yes, party time, party. Because Halloween is great for costumes, candies, and parties. Cthulhu for Dagon. Cthulhu for Dagon. Oh, you've never heard the song? That's okay, because I'm going to play it. This is my show. I mean, after all, you did have a story about Dagon. And in some parts of the thing, mythology, you know? Dagon is like the father of Cthulhu to things. At least that is what some authors believe. The Cthulhu mythos is really messed up. It's one convoluted sort of thing, but that's okay. It's like Creative Commons license. way back in the 30s. You know, you really should read more Cthulhu stories. Yep. Oh, the Call of Cthulhu. Good song, too. If you're into metal. Anyway, Howard Phillips Lovecraft. Interesting guy, wasn't he? Anyway, really, it's hard to describe. He didn't like Dagon much. No, he didn't. It's really hard to find too many stories of his that he liked. It was strange. He didn't like his own stories after a while. He would write them, he would sell them, and not get much compensation. This is why we want you to donate to Cast of Wonders, because we want you to help our little authors. Wait, I really shouldn't be helping them out. I mean, I am here crashing the party, crashing the podcast, and here having fun. Who got that picture of me for the show notes? I don't know, but man, my hair doesn't look like that anymore. but you really should try your best to find more Howard Phillips Lovecraft stories, because they are interesting stories. And I think I'm done. I'm being pushed out of here. No, I'm gonna be here. No. I'll be back. I will be back. Oh, come on. Let me say one thing. No. Happy Halloween.
It hurts.
Join us next week for the science fiction tale The Middle Rages by Joseph Kellogg. If you've enjoyed this story, then please lend a hand in supporting podcast fiction. Leave us in the story a review on iTunes or on our Facebook page, and share the episode with others. You can find us on Twitter as well. We're at Cast of Wonders. And please consider making a donation via the PayPal links on our site. All of our donations go to cover bandwidth costs and purchase stories to bring to you. Every bit helps, and you have our heartfelt thanks week after week. Cast of Wonders is a production of Wolfsbane Publishing and is brought to you by the creative team of Barry J. Northern, our publisher and artist, Alan Sale, our audio producer, and I remain as always your humble editor and host, Marguerite Kenner. Our episodes are released under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives license. Please share it, but please don't change it. Our theme, Appeal to Heavens, is from Alexi Knob at musicalley.com. Thanks for listening.
Hang on just a second, Marguerite. Before we go, we have to acknowledge a few people, actually. First of all, the song heard during the Creeper skit segment, improv sort of thing, it is released under a Creative Commons Non-Commercial No Derivatives Share Alike 3.0 license. Just like Cast of Wonders, it can be found at thefump.com. And it was fun. It was fun to use. I originally wasn't going to use it, but it just kind of fell into place, and it worked out, I think. It's just a background track. I wasn't really going to let you all have to just hear music without anything going on. Not that kind of podcast. The voice of the Creeper, of course, done by me.
Ooh, guess the cat's out of the bag.
But I enjoy doing that character, and I actually have some ideas for that character in a different setting entirely. It's a long story about it, and the extra picture in this episode's show notes is me in full facial makeup and whatnot for the Creeper. So I had that done in 2011. A lot of fun for that Halloween. in particular. That's why I wanted to bring the Creeper to Cast of Wonders. It's probably my favorite quote-unquote character to do when given the chance, because I can just fly off the handle. Speaking of characters, I want to thank Washington State voiceover artist out of Washington State, Ty Anderson, for providing his voices. And if you stay tuned after me jibber jabbering a little bit here, I got a little something extra for you. I know this is a longer episode of Cast of Wonders, but what the heck? It's Halloween week. You deserve a few treats for being loyal listeners of Cast of Wonders. I also want to thank a longtime friend of mine and someone I have worked for and known for over 10 years. He is a radio DJ out of Southern Louisiana. He has also done work in Eugene, Oregon, Southern California, other areas. He also did work in New Orleans back before Katrina. That's where I met him during those days. His name is Jace Edwards, and like Marguerite told me in an email, he is definitely able to nail kind of like a Mark Hamill-esque Joker, and it's always fun when Jace and I kind of get together and get to do things. So I enjoyed having Jace aboard. I enjoyed having Ty aboard as well. Ty Anderson is going to be involved with some other projects separate from Cast of Wonders in the near future. One project in particular, and one other thing, but you'll have to find out to where that's going to pop up. I can't quite say yet, but we do hope you enjoyed the madness this week, and don't worry, we're going to get back to normal, if you can call it that, for next week. So thanks again for listening to Cast of Wonders. For everyone, I am Alan Sale. Onward and upward. Embrace each experience.
Hello, kiddies, and happy Halloween to you all. I'm going to tell you the story about little Miss Muffet. One day, she's sitting on a tuffet, whatever that is, and eating her curds and whey. Yuck, is all I can say. And a really big spider was coming up to sneak up on her. And, well, this time, little Miss Muffet was prepared. She grabbed her baseball bat, turned around, and beat the spider to a pulp. And after that, no more spider, and she finished her curds and whey sitting on her tuffet. Happy Halloween to everyone.